The steel clamp clicked shut around my trailer wheel at 8:12 Saturday morning. The man installing it stood up, brushed off his gloves, and said, "Now maybe you'll learn to follow HOA rules." His vest read, "Compliance Enforcement." His badge said, "Officer." Neither meant a damn thing. His partner slapped a fluorescent tow warning onto the trailer frame. $85 fine. 48 hours to pay, then removal. Celeste Voss had decided that one disputed HOA citation gave her the right to send 2 men onto my property and immobilize my trailer 20 feet inside my own driveway. I didn't argue. I didn't tell them I'd spent 24 years as a county fire marshal. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Fake authority has one weakness. When nobody stops it, it keeps talking. By Monday morning, Celeste had given me something much bigger than an $85 parking dispute to investigate. 5 days earlier, that trailer had been the least interesting thing in Ashford Ridge Estates. It was a 6x12 utility trailer, galvanized frame wood deck, no graphics, no rusted lawnmower permanently growing through it. I used it for lumber, bags of mulch, and the kind of weekend jobs that begin with, "This should only take an hour," and end with you standing in a hardware store at 6:40 p.m., buying the third size bolt you were sure you wouldn't need. I was 46 then, newly retired after 24 years in county fire prevention. I had started at 22 doing inspections nobody wanted, and reports nobody wanted to read. Over the years I worked structure fire investigations, commercial code cases, hazardous occupancies, administrative warrants, contractor violations, and enough public hearings to learn one useful thing about authority. Real authority usually comes with paperwork. The people who have it rarely need to decorate it. My wife Lenora and I moved to Ashford Ridge because retirement had made our old house feel too close to everything I was trying to leave behind. She wanted sidewalks and neighbors who waved. I wanted a workshop and enough driveway that I could back a trailer without negotiating with a mailbox. Ashford Ridge gave us both. 88 homes sat along curved streets at the edge of Spotsylvania County, Virginia. Brick fronts, vinyl siding, 2-car garages, young maples planted at mathematically responsible intervals. On damp mornings you could smell wet pine from the tree line behind the south lots. By 6:30 the neighborhood sounded like garage doors, diesel pickups, and men discovering they had forgotten their coffee on the kitchen counter. For years the HOA had been boring. That is a compliment. The board collected dues paid for landscaping, opened the pool, and sent a polite notice if somebody abandoned the couch beside the curb. The parking section of the covenants was short. No abandoned vehicles, no blocking fire lanes, no commercial storage that created a nuisance. Then Celeste Voss became president. Celeste was 54 tall and slim, with bright blonde hair cut to her neck and swept to one side. She favored a bold fuchsia pantsuit matching top pink heels and small gold jewelry that caught the clubhouse lights whenever she turned her head. She had the polished stillness of somebody who believed silence made other people nervous. Her campaign had been built around one phrase: professional standards. At her second meeting, she introduced Civic Compliance Solutions LLC, a contractor that would, in her words, take enforcement out of the hands of neighbors and put it in the hands of professionals. That sounded reasonable until the professionals started finding violations nobody had known existed. Work vans, small trailers, guest cars, pickups with ladder racks, a plumber who parked after dark, a warehouse supervisor whose van was still in the driveway at 5 in the morning. The nicer SUVs seemed to enjoy diplomatic immunity. My first notice arrived on a Monday. Unauthorized recreational equipment, $85. I read it twice because my trailer was neither unauthorized nor recreational. Unless hauling pressure-treated lumber had become a leisure sport, somebody had classified it creatively. So I sent Celeste one email. Please identify the specific covenant provision authorizing this violation and fine. Her answer came 13 minutes later. Payment is due Friday. Failure to comply may result in authorized enforcement action. No section number. No rule. No explanation. Just a deadline. I had spent enough years reading official notices to recognize language chosen for its sound rather than its meaning. Authorized enforcement action. Property hold. Removal eligibility. Phrases that wore a necktie even when they had no job. Friday passed. Saturday morning smelled like coffee and wet asphalt. At 8:12, I heard metal close around my trailer wheel. The larger man was still standing beside the trailer when I lowered my phone just enough to see his badge clearly. It was brass-colored, shield-shaped, and stamped officer across the center. No county seal, no state agency, no department name. His partner's vest had a stitched patch that said, Civic Compliance Solutions, under the larger words, Compliance Enforcement. I pointed at the badge. What agency issued that? The man glanced down as if he had forgotten it was there. We're contracted. That wasn't my question. His jaw tightened. We're authorized by the HOA. I looked at the clamp. What law authorizes you to immobilize a vehicle or trailer on a homeowner's private lot? The HOA authorized it. Who signed the order? The HOA. 3 questions. Same answer wearing 3 different hats. I did not tell him that in 24 years I had stood in warehouses with owners screaming at me about inspection orders, and that even when I was legally empowered to shut down an unsafe occupancy, I still had to be able to point to the code section, the order, the process, and the appeal rights. You do not get authority because somebody on a volunteer board says you look official. The second man peeled another sticker halfway off its backing. I said, don't attach anything else to my property. He stopped. That mattered. I photographed the clamp from every angle, including the serial number. I photographed their badges, their vests, the white SUV at the curb, the license plate, the orange beacon mounted on the roof, the warning notice, the position of the trailer, and the survey pin near the edge of my driveway. Then I measured. From the nearest public sidewalk line to the trailer tongue, 20 feet 4 inches. From the trailer tire to my side property line, 6 feet 11 inches. Nothing was in the street. Nothing crossed the sidewalk. Nothing touched common property. The men watched me with the mild irritation of contractors who had expected an argument and instead got a tape measure. What are you doing? The larger one asked. Making sure we remember where everything was. He laughed once. You planning to sue over $85? No. That answer seemed to relax him. I did not add not yet. After they left, the clamp stayed. I could have cut it off in under 2 minutes. I had an angle grinder in my shop, 3 cutting wheels, and the kind of retired man confidence that comes from owning more tools than remaining major household projects. But destroying disputed evidence is satisfying for about 30 seconds, and useful for almost nobody. Instead, I slid a floor jack under the axle, put a wheel dolly beneath the clamped tire, and rolled the trailer deeper onto my property, into the open bay of my workshop. I never touched the clamp mechanism. I never damaged it. The device remained exactly as they had left it. That was deliberate. When there is a dispute over what somebody did to your property, preserving the thing they did can be more valuable than immediately undoing it. That afternoon, I drafted a certified letter to Celeste and copied the HOA management address. I requested 5 things: the exact covenant provision, the board resolution approving wheel immobilization, the contract with Civic Compliance Solutions, the written enforcement policy, and the legal authority Celeste believed allowed a private vendor to clamp property located entirely on a homeowner's lot. The rule I had lived by for years was simple. If somebody claims authority, ask for the document that creates it. Celeste answered by email Sunday evening. She did not provide any of the 5 documents. Instead, she wrote, "Your refusal to cooperate has triggered an enforcement release fee of $160. Current balance, $245. Clamp removal will occur after payment clears." I read that line at the kitchen table while Lenora cut an apple into slices. So the $85 had a baby, she said. Apparently a very healthy one. Monday morning, I searched Virginia's corporate registry. Civic Compliance Solutions LLC was real. It had been formed 14 months earlier. Its registered business description listed property maintenance, inspection, photography, administrative support, and community association services. No towing operation. No government affiliation. No enforcement agency. I checked the county business license records next. Same thing. The company existed. The power Celeste had dressed it in did not. And that was when the clamp stopped looking like an HOA annoyance and started looking like evidence. There is a difference between hiring a company to deliver a notice and hiring one to manufacture the appearance of public power. I wanted to know which side of that line Celeste thought she was standing on. I started with one question. Not, has the HOA harassed you? Not, do you think Celeste is corrupt? Those questions produce opinions, and opinions multiply faster than rabbits in a neighborhood Facebook group. I asked, have those two men ever put anything on your vehicle? The first person I asked was Evan Baird, who lived 3 streets over and ran a one-man plumbing business. His van was 12 years old, white, and permanently carried the faint smell of copper pipe PVC cement and whatever emergency somebody had called him about at 2 in the morning. Evan did not answer immediately. He went inside and came back with a folded receipt. Civic Compliance Solutions. Vehicle release fee, $145. They booted my van last February, he said. Said commercial vehicles weren't allowed overnight. Was it in your driveway? Yep. Did you appeal? I had a water heater job at 7. I paid. That became the pattern. A warehouse supervisor named Orson Pike paid $190 after finding a clamp on his van before a 5 a.m. shift. He told me he never challenged it because missing 1 day could cost him the attendance bonus he depended on. A retired couple, Warren and Elsie Fenn, paid $125 to release their daughter's small travel trailer during a weekend visit. The trailer had been there less than 18 hours. I didn't know who those men were, Elsie said, but they had badges. That sentence stayed with me. I visited 9 households over 3 days. 6 had dealt with civic compliance. 4 had paid release fees. 2 had received threats of towing. I built a spreadsheet. Old habit. Dates in the first column. Original violation in the second. Amount of the HOA fine. Amount of the release fee. Contractor visit. Payment method. Whether there had been a written appeal. Whether the resident had been shown the rule. Patterns become easier to see when you stop telling yourself a story and start lining up facts. By Thursday, one pattern was hard to miss. The people getting the hardest treatment tended to drive work vehicles, older pickups, service vans, or trailers. People with schedules that made fighting a nuisance expensive. People who could lose a shift a customer or a weekend job if a vehicle stayed immobilized. Meanwhile, one board member parked a luxury SUV with 2 wheels across the sidewalk during every Thursday poker night. Another kept a boat trailer beside his garage for 6 weeks. No clamps. No fluorescent warnings. Not even an $85 love letter. This was not about race, and I was not going to invent a motive that the evidence did not support. What I could see was simpler. Celeste enforced downward. She liked rules best when they landed on people who had less time and less appetite to challenge her. Evan showed me one more thing before I left his garage. A text message from the larger compliance man. Pay today or vehicle subject to county-level enforcement. County level, I said. Yeah. He told me their badges gave them the same authority as code guys. That got my attention. There are plenty of bad contractors in the world. There are also plenty of HOA boards that write rules so badly they need a decoder ring. But representing private authority as government authority is a different kind of decision. The smell of pipe primer hung in Evan's garage while I photographed the message. Friday afternoon, Celeste sent a community-wide email. The subject line was Safety and Compliance Notice. She did not use my name, but she did not need to. One resident, she wrote, has begun approaching neighbors in an effort to interfere with lawful community enforcement and encourage non-compliance. Lenora read it over my shoulder. Congratulations, she said. You're anonymous and everybody knows who you are. I printed the email. I did not respond. That surprised Celeste more than an argument would have. People who like public pressure expect you to fight in public. They need the noise because noise makes facts harder to hear. Saturday morning, another neighbor slipped an envelope through my mail slot. Inside were 2 release receipts, a photograph of a boot on a pickup tire, and a handwritten note. They told my son they were officers. I stood in the kitchen looking at that sentence. The original $85 fine was still sitting on the counter. It suddenly looked very small. I added a new column to the spreadsheet, claimed authority. Then I went back through every interview and separated what residents had actually heard from what they assumed. That distinction mattered. If this went anywhere official, I wanted statements, not neighborhood mythology. Documentation works best when it is boring enough to survive cross-examination. Civic Compliance came back for the clamp on Monday. Not because I paid, Because I had moved the trailer into my workshop, and their equipment was now sitting behind a closed overhead door where they could not reach it without asking. The larger man, Blaine Rusk, according to the company website, stood at the edge of my driveway with the same vest and a different expression. "We need our device. I'll return it in the condition it was left. You can't hold company property." "I'm not holding it. I'm preserving it. You're welcome to retrieve it after you sign that you received it undamaged." He stared at me. Then he signed. I rolled the trailer forward on the wheel dolly, photographed the clamp before and after removal, and handed him a copy of the receipt. Blaine looked at the camera mounted over my garage. "You record everything that—" "Only things I might forget." He did not smile. Once the clamp was gone, I parked the trailer in a different position. This time I made it painfully compliant. The trailer sat parallel to the side fence, screened from the street by the approved 6-foot cedar panel, entirely behind the front plane of the house, and more than 7 feet inside my property line. I measured twice. I photographed the tape. I took wide-angle shots showing the fence sidewalk and survey marker. Then I sent Celeste a certified notice. It said the trailer was parked in a location that complied with every relevant section I could identify in the governing documents. It also said Civic Compliance Solutions and its employees had no permission to enter my property except to deliver written material at the front door. I asked her to identify any disagreement in writing. She replied the next morning. "The board does not recognize unilateral restrictions placed upon its authorized enforcement agents." That sentence was almost impressive. There are people who can take the phrase, "do not trespass on my property," and make it sound like an administrative inconvenience. I printed that email too. Then I installed 2 ordinary consumer security cameras. Nothing exotic. One covered the driveway, one covered the side parking area. Both recorded continuously to local storage and a cloud account. I placed a fixed yellow measuring marker on the fence post so the trailer's position could be seen on video without guessing. Every evening before closing the workshop, I took one still photograph. Time, position, condition. That was the second rule I had learned in investigations if a fact is going to matter later. Record it before somebody has a reason to change it. 2 nights passed. Nothing. On Thursday afternoon, Lenora and I went to Fredericksburg for dinner. We were gone an hour and 53 minutes. At 6:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the camera feed. Blaine and his partner Troy Kessler were walking up my driveway. Not to the front door. Past the posted boundary notice. Past the corner of the garage. Straight toward the trailer. Troy pointed at the camera. Blaine looked up at it, shrugged, and kept walking. I watched from a restaurant booth, while a waitress set down Lenora's iced tea. "You're making that face," she said. "What face?" "The one you used when an inspector told you the fire door had been blocked for years, and nobody knew who did it." On my phone, Blaine opened the back of the SUV and pulled out another steel clamp. The video caught everything, Troy read from a clipboard. "Repeat violation. Property subject to authorized county-style compliance action." County-style. There it was. Blaine locked the clamp around the trailer wheel. Troy attached a second fluorescent warning. Then they walked back down the driveway. They had been on my property for 4 minutes and 19 seconds. Neither had knocked. Neither had left the written authority I had requested. When we got home, I did not touch the clamp. I photographed it under the porch light and downloaded the camera files onto 2 separate drives. The next morning, Celeste emailed me a new account statement. Original fine, $85. Prior release charge, $160. Repeat enforcement fee, $225. Administrative processing, $75. Total claimed balance, $545. Then came the line she probably thought would end the matter. Failure to pay within 5 business days may result in lien action. I read it twice. Not because I was scared of a lien, because she had now created a clean timeline. Written notice that the trailer complied. Written notice denying entry. Video of her contractor entering anyway. Video of them claiming county-style authority. A second physical clamp. And a money demand that increased after I asked for documentation. Celeste thought silence meant she was winning. What it really meant was that she had finally stopped leaving me with arguments and started leaving me with exhibits. The vendor contract arrived the following Tuesday. Not from Celeste. from the association's management company after my second written records request made clear I was asking for an executed agreement, not a summary. It was 37 pages long. Most people hate contracts because contracts are designed to punish impatience. The useful sentence is rarely on page 1. It is usually buried beneath insurance requirements, notice provisions, and a paragraph explaining what happens if somebody changes an address. I made coffee and started reading. Page 14 stopped me. Scope of services. Civic Compliance Solutions was authorized to photograph suspected violations, deliver written notices, document conditions, and report compliance status to the board. That was it. No towing, no clamping, no physical restriction. I kept reading. Page 19 contained a section titled Limitations of Authority. The contractor shall not immobilize, remove, restrict access to, or otherwise exercise physical control over vehicles or personal property. The next sentence was even cleaner. The contractor shall not represent itself, its personnel uniforms, insignia, or services as governmental law enforcement, code enforcement, or other public authority. I leaned back in my chair. Lenora was working a crossword at the other end of the table. Found the sentence. Then I turned to the signature page. Celeste Voss, President, Ashford Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Dated 9 months earlier. Her signature was directly beneath the certification that the board accepted the limitations. There was no misunderstanding to explain away. She had signed the rule that said civic compliance could not do exactly what civic compliance had done to my trailer. But the contract had an attachment, 1 page, different font, no lawyer's formatting, no management company logo, operational directive, enhanced vehicle compliance. It authorized visible enforcement, presentation immobilization devices for repeat accounts, and release fee collection upon physical compliance intervention. At the bottom was 1 signature, Celeste Voss. No secretary, no treasurer, no board resolution number. I pulled the meeting minutes for the date printed on the directive. No vote. I checked the approved fine schedule. No clamp fee. No $160 release fee. No $225 repeat enforcement charge. Then I looked at the monthly ledgers the management company had sent with the contract. Payments from residents were appearing under a vague income line, Special Compliance Recovery. That was the moment the story changed. Until then, Celeste could claim she had interpreted a rule aggressively. Now I had a signed contract limiting the vendor a separate directive ordering the prohibited conduct, no recorded board authorization, and money being collected under fees that did not appear on the approved schedule. The $85 citation was no longer the center of anything. It was the doorway. Lenora looked up from her crossword. So what now? I closed the binder. Now I stop asking whether she made a mistake. I tapped Celeste's 2 signatures, one promising the contractor would never pretend to be public authority, and the other telling it how to look more official. Now I find out how many times she chose to make it. I made 3 copies of the relevant pages, and marked each one with the date I received it. One went into the working binder, one into a sealed envelope in my fireproof file box, and one went to an encrypted folder with the camera footage. It was an old habit from fire scenes. Important evidence should never depend on one device, one drawer, or one person remembering where it went. The practical point was simple: compare the rules somebody is enforcing with the contract that supposedly gives them power. Sometimes the contradiction is not hidden, it is signed. I did not call anybody from my old office. That surprised Lenora. You know people who could tell you what all this means in 10 minutes. I know people who could make it look like I'm leaning on old relationships. Retirement had taken away my title, my county email, and the little plastic card that made certain doors open faster. Good. I wanted this case to work without any of them. In fire investigations, the strongest file was the one that still made sense after you covered the investigator's name with your thumb. So I built 4 files. The first was property, deed, plat, survey markers, photographs, measurements, the certified no-entry notice, the video showing Blaine and Troy walking past the front path and around the garage to reach the trailer. The second was authority, Civic Compliance's corporate registration, business license records, screenshots of its website describing enforcement officers, close photographs of the officer badges, Evans' text referring to county-level enforcement, Troy's recorded phrase authorized county-style compliance action. The third was governance, the Ashford Ridge Covenants. Board bylaws, meeting minutes, the executed vendor contract, Celeste's one-page directive, the absence of any vote approving clamps or release fees. The fourth was money, receipts. That one grew fastest. Evan brought me his, Orson brought his, the Fenns brought theirs. 3 more residents came forward, after word spread that I was not trying to organize a neighborhood rebellion. I was trying to reconcile numbers. I asked each person to write down what happened in their own words. No coaching. No group meeting where memories could blend together. Date time, what was said, what was attached to the vehicle, what they paid and how they paid it. Boring is underrated. A witness statement that says he wore a brass badge marked officer and told me I could not use my van until I paid $145 is worth more than 10 neighbors saying those guys were basically cops. That was the third rule. Record what happened, not what you think it meant. Miriam Vale joined us quietly. Miriam had served on the board for 2 years and had the permanent expression of somebody who regretted agreeing to volunteer for anything involving meeting minutes. She sat at our kitchen table with a mug of tea and read Celeste's operational directive. I never saw this. Was there a vote? No. Any executive session? No. Did the board authorize wheel clamps? She gave me a flat look. Giddy and I argued for 3 months about replacing the clubhouse refrigerator. You think we secretly approved vehicle immobilization? Fair point. Miriam signed a statement confirming she had never voted on it. Then I traced the money. The approved HOA fine schedule listed standard violations and late fees. The release charges were nowhere on it. Yet resident payments were appearing in the ledger under Special Compliance Recovery. I did not try to decide whether that was theft fraud, a bookkeeping mess, or something else. Labels were somebody else's job. My job was to put the paper in order. I made a duplicate packet and submitted it to the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office as a private citizen. At the front desk, I said exactly what I would have wanted somebody to say to me 20 years earlier. I'm not asking you to agree with my theory. I'm asking you to review the documents and the representations being made. The deputy taking the complaint looked through the first 10 pages. You used to do investigations fireside. That explains the tabs. Color tabs are not glamorous. Neither is torquing lug nuts. Both work. The packet was assigned to investigator Rhea Calloway, who handled fraud and property complaints. I told her immediately that I had been a county fire marshal. I don't want special handling. You won't get any. Perfect. I also sent the vendor contract Celeste's directive and the resident receipts to the HOA's retained counsel and insurance carrier. Not accusations. Documents. My cover letter asked 3 questions. Was clamping authorized under the contract? Were the listed release fees part of the approved HOA schedule? Had the board lawfully approved the operational directive? Then I waited. Waiting irritates controlling people. They cannot tell whether you are scared finished or preparing something. 9 days before the annual meeting, Celeste published the agenda. Item 7 read, Removal of Chronic Compliance Threats. Miriam texted me one word, you. I printed the agenda and slipped it into the front of the binder. Celeste had scheduled the date reserved the room, invited the neighborhood, and put my dispute on the agenda. All I had to do was bring the paperwork she had been refusing to discuss. 3 days after I sent the packet to the HOA attorney, Celeste discovered the word clarification. People usually discover that word when the original version of events starts causing trouble. Her email went to all 88 homes. Recent misinformation has suggested that Civic Compliance Solutions personnel represented themselves as governmental officials. This is false. They are private compliance representatives whose identification merely facilitates safe interaction with residents. I read that paragraph while sitting on the back steps with a cup of coffee. Then I played Troy's video again. Authorized county-style compliance action. Clear as a church bell. The attorney's response arrived 2 hours later. Not to the neighborhood. To the board. Miriam forwarded it because by then she had stopped pretending Celeste's internal emails were protecting anybody. Counsel wrote that the contract did not authorize immobilization, towing, physical control of resident property, or representations suggesting public authority. He advised the board to suspend civic compliance activity immediately pending review. Celeste did not suspend anything. Instead, she called an emergency board meeting. The stated purpose was to ratify and clarify historical enforcement procedures. Retroactive paperwork is a fascinating animal. It appears suddenly, usually after somebody asks where the original paperwork was. At the meeting, Celeste produced revised minutes from a session 6 months earlier. A new sentence appeared under compliance discussion. The board expressed support for enhanced vehicle control measures as necessary. Miriam had the original draft minutes on her laptop. That sentence was not there. Neither was any motion. Neither was a vote count, Miriam asked. When was this language added? Celeste folded her hands. The minutes were corrected to reflect the substance of the discussion. By whom? As president, I have administrative authority to ensure accuracy. I sat in the back row and said nothing. The room smelled like burnt coffee from the clubhouse machine and the lemon cleaner the management company used on the folding tables. There is something about fluorescent lighting that makes bad governance look even cheaper. Celeste moved to approve the revised minutes and then ratify all prior actions of civic compliance. One board member raised his hand. Can that fix the clamps? Celeste answered before counsel could. Yes. Counsel, who had joined by speakerphone, said no. The room went quiet. He continued carefully. A board may vote on future policy, subject to the governing documents and applicable law. A later vote does not automatically make prior conduct contractually authorized, and it does not change what the vendor represented itself to be at the time. Celeste's mouth tightened. She tried a different route. These homeowners were in violation. Counsel said, that is a separate question. That sentence did more damage than anything I could have said. Petty authority survives by blending questions together. Was the trailer permitted? Was the fine valid? Could the contractor enter private property? Could it clamp the trailer? Could it call itself an officer? Could Celeste invent a release fee? Celeste needed all of those to feel like one question with one answer, because the HOA said so. Counsel had just separated them in public. The insurance carrier followed the next morning with a reservation of rights letter. It warned that intentional conduct outside the vendor agreement might not be treated the same way as ordinary board mistakes. Suddenly, 2 members of the compliance committee resigned. Not from the board, just from the part most likely to appear in an attorney's letter. Courage has many forms. Sometimes it looks like principle. Sometimes it looks like removing your name from a committee before lunch. Celeste's response was predictable. She sent another neighborhood email claiming I was using former government connections to intimidate volunteer community leaders. That one deserved an answer. I wrote one sentence. I am retired. Every governing document and public record I reviewed is available to every homeowner. Nothing else. No resume. No threats. No mention of investigator Calloway. No photograph of my old credentials. Celeste wanted me to turn the dispute into Gideon versus Celeste. I wanted it to remain contract versus conduct. The following evening, Miriam called. She's still bringing civic compliance to the annual meeting. For what? Security. I looked at Lenora across the kitchen. She closed her eyes for a second. Of course she is. 2 men whose claimed authority was now under formal review were going to stand at the doors, while Celeste told 88 homeowners that I was the threat. I could not have designed the visual better if I tried. The only thing missing was the meeting itself. And by then the meeting was no longer about whether my trailer belonged behind a fence. It was about whether a president could manufacture power first and paperwork second. Civic Compliance changed its website on Monday morning. I knew because I had been checking it once a day. The banner that had said Professional Enforcement Officers from Modern Communities disappeared. In its place, Courteous Compliance Representatives. The photographs changed too. The old images showed reflective vests, brass shields, radios clipped high on the shoulder, and a white SUV with an amber light bar. The new version showed 2 men holding tablets beside a flower bed. Very peaceful. Very administrative. Very late. I had saved the old pages as PDFs with timestamps. People sometimes treat changing a website as if it changes history. It does not. It just tells you somebody has become aware that history exists. The same afternoon, investigator Calloway called. I want to confirm something about the second clamp. I walked her through the timeline. Certified, no entry notice delivered Tuesday. Camera footage Thursday. Trailer position documented daily. No payment. No verbal confrontation. She asked whether I had told the men I was a former fire marshal. No. Celeste, no. Anyone at civic compliance? Not that I know of. There was a pause. Good. That was all she said. I did not ask what she had found. I had spent too much of my career telling complainants that an investigation was not a group project. Tuesday, Blaine Rusk contacted her voluntarily. I learned about that only later after the meeting, but the timing mattered. Blaine had apparently decided that being a compliance officer was less enjoyable once lawyers began asking where the officer part came from. He told Calloway that Celeste had insisted on the badges and vests. According to his statement, she told them homeowners needed to believe non-payment had immediate consequences. Troy produced text messages. One of them would become important. Celeste badges must be visible on approach. Another, if they ask who authored you, say community enforcement. And then the sentence that stripped away every innocent explanation she had left. Make it look official enough that they don't argue. I did not see that message before the annual meeting. Calloway kept investigative material where it belonged. But I knew the temperature had changed because Thursday afternoon she asked whether the meeting was open to all homeowners. Yes. What time's 7? Address I gave it to her. Will you be there? I'm on the agenda. I know. Then she hung up. That same day, Celeste mailed me a formal notice of lien intent for the $545 balance. It was printed on heavy paper certified and written in the kind of legal-adjacent English people use when they want a document to frighten you before anyone checks whether it can do what it says. Lenora set it on the table beside the fruit bowl. You worried? About the paper number? About the meeting? I thought about that. Yes. She raised an eyebrow. I had spent years entering burned buildings after suppression crews were done, interviewing angry owners, testifying in hearings, and telling businesses they could not reopen until hazards were corrected. But this was my home. Different stakes. At work, you leave the case file in the office. At home, the case file sits 10 feet from the refrigerator. Friday evening, I went through the binder one last time. The original $85 citation went in the front pocket. Behind it, the first clamp. Notice the second clamp. Notice the deed. The camera stills, the vendor contract, the limitation clause, Celeste's directive, the meeting minutes, the release receipts, and the attorney's letter. No theatrics. No old badge. No uniform. I wore the same red and black flannel shirt I had worn the morning they clamped the trailer. Gray t-shirt underneath, jeans, brown leather shoes. At 6:35 p.m., Lenora and I walked toward the clubhouse. Through the windows, I could already see Celeste near the podium in her fuchsia suit. Blaine and Troy stood by the entrance. No brass badges this time. Interesting. Their vests said, Compliance Representative. Also interesting. And in the back row, wearing plain clothes, sat Investigator Rhea Calloway, beside a uniformed deputy I did not know. Celeste saw me notice them. For the first time since the $85 notice arrived, she looked uncertain, only for a second. Then the smile came back. People who build power out of appearances get very good at repairing the appearance. At 7 sharp, Celeste tapped the microphone. Let's begin. I put my binder on my lap. Inside the front pocket, the original citation waited. $85. The cheapest piece of paper in the room, and the one that had brought everybody there. Celeste controlled the first 20 minutes. She approved the previous meeting minutes, thanked the landscaping committee, announced the pool filter repair, and spoke with the calm efficiency of somebody hoping normal procedure could create normal reality. Then she reached item 7, removal of chronic compliance threats. My name appeared on the projector. Gideon Mercer, repeat vehicle violations, $545 outstanding. Celeste looked toward me. Mr. Mercer has repeatedly refused lawful enforcement, interfered with our contracted personnel, and encouraged other residents to disregard community standards. Celeste displayed a photograph of my trailer. His original violation was $85. It could have ended there. I stood. You're right about one thing, she smiled. I walked to the front with the binder. It could have. I put the first photograph on the projector. My trailer 20 feet inside the driveway on the morning of the first clamp. Then the deed diagram. Then the measurement photograph. Celeste interrupted. This is not a property line dispute. I agree. That surprised her. I showed the first fluorescent notice. Who authorized civic compliance to immobilize this trailer? The association. Through what document? The enforcement agreement. I turned to page 19. The clause filled the screen. The room became very quiet. I read only the relevant sentence. Contractor shall not immobilize, remove, restrict access to, or otherwise exercise physical control over vehicles or personal property. Celeste shifted. Contents have to be read as a whole. Absolutely. I advanced one paragraph. Contractor shall not represent itself, its personnel, uniforms, insignia, or services as governmental law enforcement, code enforcement, or other public authority. Celeste moved toward the microphone. These workers never claimed to be police. I clicked the video. Troy appeared on the screen beside my trailer. Repeat violation. Property subject to authorized county-style compliance action. Evan Baird called from the third row. He told me the same thing. Celeste raised a hand. Please, we will maintain order. I changed slides. Her operational directive appeared. Enhanced vehicle compliance. Visible enforcement presentation. Immobilization devices. Release fee collection. At the bottom, her signature. I put the vendor contract signature beside it. Same name, same handwriting. 2 documents. One saying the contractor would not clamp property or resemble public authority. The other telling it to do both. Celeste stared at the screen. That directive implemented board policy. Miriam Vale stood. No, it didn't. Miriam held up the original meeting minutes. There was no vote. I was on the board. I never saw that directive until Gideon showed it to me. Celeste's voice sharpened. We discussed enhanced enforcement. We discussed adding reminder letters. That is your interpretation. Miriam shook her head. No, that's the minutes. Then Evan walked forward and placed his $145 release receipt on the table. Orson added his. The Fens added theirs. One by one, residents stood. Receipts, not speeches. I put the approved fine schedule on screen. No release fee appears here, I said. No clamp charge appears here. So I have one question. Where did these amounts come from? Celeste pointed at me. You are presenting yourself as some kind of legal authority. No. I let that sit. I spent 24 years as a county fire marshal. Celeste blinked. I continued. I spent a career working with delegated authority. Inspection orders, administrative process, code hearings, situations where government actually did have the power to tell a property owner what had to change. I pointed to the contract on the screen. I know what delegated authority looks like. Then I pointed to her directive. And I know what it looks like when it doesn't exist. Celeste tried to answer. I did not give her a dramatic threat. I did not say she was going to jail. That was not my call. I closed the binder. Everything else is in the investigator's file. For the first time, Celeste looked toward the back row. Investigator Calloway stood. Calloway walked forward slowly. Miss Voss, after the meeting, I need to speak with you, Mr. Rusk, and Mr. Kessler, regarding the complaints and records our office is reviewing. Blaine stepped away from the entrance. Troy did the same. Celeste gripped the podium. I move that we adjourn. Miriam said, I move that we don't. A laugh moved through the room. Then she made 3 formal motions. Suspend and terminate civic compliance subject to council's review. Void all disputed clamp and release charges pending reimbursement. Remove Celeste as presiding officer for the remainder of the meeting and schedule a board confidence vote. Hands went up. The first motion passed 7-0 among the directors still serving. The second passed 7-0. The third passed 5-2. Celeste stood beside the projector while her own signature remained enlarged behind her. Just the slow sound of folding chairs, homeowners whispering, and a board finally voting on the authority she had spent months pretending it already possessed. The steel clamp had made a loud click when this started. Celeste's power ended with something quieter. A show of hands. Over the next several weeks, Investigator Calloway collected statements, copies of the payment records, the contract Celeste's directive, and the communications turned over by civic compliance. The matter was referred for formal review based on the representations of authority, unauthorized entry onto private property, vehicle immobilization, and money collected through release fees. I stayed out of it. That was important. After that, the people with current badges did their jobs. The HOA's insurer and attorney moved faster. Within 10 days, the board announced that every documented clamp or release payment collected under Celeste's directive would be refunded. Evan got his $145 back. Orson got his $190. The Fens got their $125. My own account was reset to zero. The original $85 citation was voided. The $160 release charge was voided. The repeat enforcement fee and processing charge disappeared. The lien notice was formally withdrawn. Civic Compliance Solutions lost the Ashford Ridge contract and stopped advertising HOA enforcement officers. Blaine and Troy no longer worked neighborhood vehicle enforcement. Celeste lasted another 11 days on the board. She resigned before the scheduled confidence vote. Her email was 4 paragraphs long and described her departure as a response to an increasingly hostile volunteer environment. Lenora read that line and said, "That's one way to describe receipts." Miriam refused to run for president. "I have suffered enough," she told me. The neighborhood elected a homeowner named Calder Wynn, an accountant who had never served on the board and seemed almost suspiciously excited by the phrase written procedure. His platform fit on one sheet of paper. Every violation notice had to quote the actual rule. Every homeowner received an appeal period before additional penalties. Any outside enforcement contract required a recorded board vote. No wheel clamps. No private property immobilization. No contractor badge or uniform that could reasonably be confused with government authority. I was asked to join the board. I declined. I had retired once already. A month later, I backed the utility trailer into the same screened spot beside my workshop. Nothing happened. No fluorescent sticker. No white SUV. No reflective vest. Just the beep of my pickup in reverse and the crunch of gravel under the trailer tires. Ordinary can feel pretty good after somebody has tried to turn your driveway into a jurisdiction. The most unexpected part came in spring. The board had a small amount of recovered insurance money and administrative savings left after the refunds were completed. Someone suggested spending it on new entrance landscaping. Evan suggested something better. Ashford Ridge Fire Safe Saturday. Once a year, the clubhouse parking lot would host free smoke alarm replacement for older residents, extinguisher checks, simple home escape planning, and a small hardship fund for basic safety repairs. I agreed to help organize it. Not as a marshal, just as the guy on Willowbend Lane who knew a few things about smoke alarms. On the first Saturday, kids practiced crawling beneath a fabric smoke tunnel while their parents drank bad clubhouse coffee. Evan helped an elderly neighbor install 2 new alarms. Lenora ran the sign-in table and somehow convinced half the street to bring baked goods. My trailer sat beside the curb, loaded with folding tables and boxes of detectors. Nobody clamped it. Near noon, I stood beside it, watching neighbors talk in groups that had not existed 6 months earlier. The strange thing about petty power is that it makes people feel isolated. Everybody assumes they are the only one being pushed around. Then somebody compares paperwork. Doors open. Receipts come out. People start talking. I still have the original $85 citation in a file drawer. Not because I need it. Because every once in a while it is useful to remember how small a piece of paper can be when it starts something much larger. And if you have ever had an HOA invent a rule, a fee, or an authority you could not find anywhere in writing, share the story. Sometimes the first useful question is simply whether anybody else got the same notice. And if you like stories where the paperwork eventually catches up with the people waving it around, subscribe. There are plenty more neighborhoods out there. And that's where Gideon Mercer's part of the story ends. What stays with me is how ordinary that first number was. $85. Small enough that most people would probably pay it just to make the problem disappear. Gideon didn't make a scene. He didn't pull out an old credential and try to win the driveway argument on Saturday morning. He asked where the authority came from, kept the clamp intact, saved the messages, and let the paperwork answer the question later. There's something very familiar about that, especially if you've lived under an HOA long enough. A letter arrives looking official. A deadline is printed in bold. Somebody uses words like enforcement and authorized, and suddenly you're supposed to assume every part of it has been checked. Would you have paid the $85 and moved on, or would you have started asking for the documents? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious where your line would have been. If you enjoyed this one, like the video, subscribe to the HOA Lab, and share it with somebody who has their own HOA story. A badge can make a person look official. Paperwork is what tells you whether they actually are.